Lippert, welcome to my channel. I'm so happy to be meeting with you here today and to be able to talk about your work and your life. I'm in Chicago and you are where?
I'm in Germany, the very west of Germany, near Cologne, Bonn, in that area.
Okay, it's hot there too, right? We're at the very early start of September. It's hot here in Chicago. Not hot, not too bad.
Yeah, it's like we have a late summer this year, so usually in September it's getting the nice part of summer, but this year it's all a little bit mixed up, and so I'm very excited to be here today, and I'm very happy to be here, and this excitement is also increased by the high temperature today, so that was
Yes. Same
yeah.
here. Well, I'm excited to have you. And we have so many incredibly beautiful pieces to cover, to talk about today, and also aspects of your life. I mean, you're a very, very well established bead artist and a bead educator, beading educator. You've taught internationally, and we're going to look at some images from your different teaching trips in just a minute. First of all, I want to go over your three books. You've published three books so far. The first one was called in English, The Beader's Cookbook in 2009. Now, why did you call it The Beader's Cookbook?
Actually, it was published first in German, and this book, the idea behind this book was to have different components, smaller components, not too complicated components that you can just join to become a bracelet, a pair of earrings, a necklace, whatever you like, or a sphere even. And that's why we called it like that. And as some kind of joke, we named all the pieces like recipes, like blueberry soup or something like this. They had weird names, all the pieces. And after a couple of years, the publisher decided to also make an English version of the book, so it's also available in the English version now.
Okay, and I think it's on Amazon. I've seen it on
It's
Amazon.
on
I
Amazon.
will
Yeah,
put the links to this book and your
yeah.
other books in the show notes. You also published Beaded Fantasies, which I think is a wonderful title for a book in 2012.
Yeah.
Tell me about that
Yeah.
book.
Yeah, Beaded Fantasies. This was really very, very exciting time back then when I got contacted. Someone here gave me a warning ahead. This was a woman. She was working for a German beading magazine, and she told me that Ray Hamachandra is going to call me. And I have to admit, I had to Google first. That was, and he was the the boss of the department for from Lark Books for the publishing of beading books and the masterclass series back then, which probably many beaders know and remember. And he was calling me, and I was so blown away after that call that he wanted to make a book with me, and it was a very nice talk. But I was so nervous, and then I remember I just called my mom right after that and said to my mom, Hollywood called me, and I really felt like that. And Beaded Fantasies was really an introduction of mine to the international beading scene. I think we had some classics in there and all kinds of pieces, and people still bead things of this book and publish or put the pictures on Facebook, and it's still, although it's already like more than 10 years ago now, it's a long time. Whenever I see okay, publishing date was then, I'm blown away how much time went by since, that's
Well, it's become a classic. It's become
yeah.
a treasured classic. It's the kind of book that we beaters, we take it out. It is already so worn out because we've used it so much. We've
Yeah.
loved it so much that we eventually we have to buy a second copy. That's what kind of book this is. All right, and then you came out with a Beadwork Evolution, another book in
Yeah.
2014.
Yeah, beadwork evolution was already it was more from my point of view, it was more a technical book. In the beaded fantasies, I was introducing several pieces that I made so far, but in the beadwork evolution, there's also one thing that I mentioned in the introduction of the book, that sometimes you bead something and you make a mistake, or you hit the wall somehow in this design, line and can't get further, and then you try something else. And so that one piece of beadwork is evolving to the next piece of beadwork, and to get from one idea into the next idea. This is a fluent process, and this was what I wanted to show in beadwork evolution, because sometimes you have these happy mistakes when you're beading, and a happy mistake will bring you to a complete different technique and a new technique and experiencing a new technique, and that was the red thread in that book for me.
Well, it's a beautiful book. I love my copy, and everyone loves their copy. Now, do you see yourself going on maybe to do another book, or are you kind of taking a break from books? I know how much effort they are.
To me, the one problem is, I'm talking a lot. Sometimes it's like you open the box of Pandora when you let me talk, but it's the same when I'm writing instructions. To me, the core of my instructions is that every workshop that I was teaching, every time I had a request from a beader when they couldn't understand what I meant in this pattern or that pattern, that I added this to my portfolio and say, like, okay, I have to explain this one separately because people misunderstand it, or I have to show this more detail because otherwise people will misunderstand it. And when you publish a book, the first thing that they tell you is, you have 200 drawings that for the book, including the introduction and everything, which means you have to put like 5 steps in one drawing, which can be sometimes a little bit confusing. And this was like limiting me. And now when you publish your own patterns, you make a PDF, and I don't care whether these are 5 pages or 60 pages. Mm-hmm. It takes as long as it takes to explain. And I want the people to be able to bead the piece as I did it. And if it takes 60 pages, it's fine. And you have to like lock that up again a little bit when you do that in a book, but never say never. Okay. Having a book is exciting on its own, but it's a different kind of writing instructions, definitely.
Right. It's more technical. It's more limiting, as you said. So in effect, you're publishing your own patterns, as many, giving them the fullest attention that they need, which you can't do in a book. Okay, so you've taught really all around the world, and now we're going to get into your teaching career. And it's not just your teaching career, though. I mean, you're making friends. You were making friends all over the world with other beaders as you were going to different events, and also with students, right? So this first one here, you in your early international teaching career, from about 2010 to about 2011. On the left here, we have a photo of you just with a student. And was that in England? I forget.
This was in the UK. This was in southern England. I was teaching there for Stitch and Craft. The shop closed meanwhile. That's a pity, but it was Lynn Firth was the owner, and she and Blanche from New Jersey, from Beads by Blanche, they were the first ones to invite me for international teaching, which was the next time Hollywood is calling, when you just feel like, okay, someone is inviting me to come to the States to teach. And that was really exciting. And back then I was really not known. So it was, for both of them, it was a risk to get the classes filled, but it worked out in the end. So.
Okay, and so we have Blanche on the right.
Blanche Costa on the right. She has a name for at least on the East Coast. A lot of people were coming there and flying in there to go to the classes. She had all the big names there teaching in her store, and
Okay. All right, and in this next slide, we have Suzanne Golden, who was kind of a transformative person in your life, would you say?
Yeah, this was this picture I got from Marcia de Costa's blog, because that was exactly where I saw this picture. It was I remember that it was in around 2009, and I think this was taken in 2009, the picture. And I just saw this and thought, okay, there is a place in the world where all the beaders are going, the big names are going there. And I thought, okay, I have to be there once in my life, once in my life I want to be in Milwaukee. So I grabbed all my money and got a ticket and everything. And I wanted to go to Bead and Button show. And next year I was there. And it was actually this picture from Suzanne, seeing her saying like, okay, everybody's right. Marcia is there, Suzanne is there, this one is there, this one is there. And I just wanted to be, I got complete star envy there.
Oh, I love the bracelet she's wearing. She's like, well,
Oh,
like you,
yeah.
she's so talented, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. She's a hoot.
Okay. And so, yes, she is in every
Yeah.
way. So was your first Bead and Button 2010, I think, right?
I said, yeah, it was 2010. And the thing was, in 2009, I also joined Facebook. Because another beader, up to that point, I was blogging, and there were some other bloggers commenting on my blog posts, and one of them was her artist's name is Sand Fibers. It's Caradine Sharp. She's a peyote. She's doing a lot of peyote pieces and patterns, and she said to me, "You have to go to Facebook because we had some exchange. She was carving for marzipan, and I sent her some marzipan. In return, she sent me some raku cabochons, and she said that people were completely excited. She posted the pictures of my pieces on Facebook, put a link to my blog on Facebook, and she said, "You have to come to Facebook." So I joined Facebook at the same time, and then seeing this picture from Suzanne, and then we were planning, a friend of mine, because I got a little coward and said I can't go alone to Bead and Button show, so a friend of mine, she joined. And then I thought like, okay, now we're going there. We don't actually know anyone, So I sent out friend requests to everyone, I thought like, okay. So we also sent a friend request to Suzanne Golden. And it was always like, she replied to me. Now we're friends on Facebook. Okay, next step,
Mm.
And when we went to Milwaukee the next year, we already had a date with Suzanne.
That's great. That's great. I mean,
Before we went there, yeah. And from that point on, every year there was one evening where we met Suzanne and her gang from New York, Stacey Creamer, and who was all there in there. And we always went to the Thai restaurant across the street from the Hyatt in Milwaukee. And this was one evening, and we were all having dinner there together. This was from the
wonderful.
very first year on. Yeah.
So this image from 2010 is of Marcia
Yeah.
DeCoster on the left and
Yeah.
Suzanne on the right. That's
Yeah.
Bead and Button 2010. It looks like you
Yes,
guys are like very involved in shopping or something.
Yeah.
Or were you at the restaurant?
Yeah, this was at Meet the Teachers, and the shopping girl here is Suzanne. And I think Marcia was working because she was teaching classes, so she had to take care of her booth.
Okay.
And so, of course, I had to take my own Suzanne picture then on that Bead and Button show.
Of course you did. But of course.
Yeah.
And I'm sure she took a few of you too.
I don't remember that.
And in 2012, we have a slide of you at different events. You want to go from left to right? Tell us just a little bit about each event.
On the left, that's actually the group, the German gang and the New York gang, Suzanne's gang. That we were just on the way. We were always meeting in the lobby of the Hyatt, and then we were going to the other side of the street. And this was actually the group where we were meeting. And in the middle, this picture with Maggie Meister, I just love this picture because was the first time that we were meeting. And Maggie and I, we actually didn't have any personal contact up to that point, but I was a big fan of her because she just published her book in the masterclass series back then. And I was so in love with this book because Maggie has a totally different way to attempt a piece of beadwork. She has her historic inspirations. She sees a Jewish wedding ring and she makes it into a bracelet or so. Yes, she's completely inspired in a different way, and this was very interesting to me. So I was reading her book from page 1 to the last page, and I was completely excited about that. And when I heard that she was going to teach in Germany, I was going there, and it's like, okay, for Americans, probably not a long drive, but for a German, it's a very long drive when you sit 5 hours in your car. That's very long for us. We drove there and we met at the first place. And I remember in that evening, I'm not sure whether it's okay to say that because smoking is not healthy, but back then Maggie was still smoking. And she wanted to, she ran out of cigarettes. We were sitting in a restaurant. She ran out of cigarettes. And I said, no problem. I'm not smoking anymore, but I can get you some cigarettes. So we went to an automat. And while I quit smoking a while ago, the automats here changed. So you had to put your ID in that you're not underage or whatever. So we had to go like 10 times to this machine until we finally had something to get her the cigarettes. And in this 10 times going to that machine, probably our friendship was born.
That's a beautiful story.
Yeah, we had the same kind of humor, and ever since, I just love this woman. She's a great human being.
She's a great human being. She's wonderful and a gifted
Yeah,
artist
yeah,
too. Yeah.
absolutely,
Okay,
absolutely.
and on the right,
Yeah.
Hoy
Yeah, that's
Peterson.
yeah. Hype is my very very close to heart friend. Although whenever I'm somewhere in on the West Coast, I try to make it happen that we can meet again. He traveled several times to Germany because originally he was born in the Netherlands, so when he was visiting family there, he was also teaching here locally, and then I was interpreting for him. This was taken at a craft show in Creativa in Dortmund, which is a very big, huge German craft show, not a bead show, it's a craft show, but they had a bead section there. And yeah, I was lending him my hair because Hype doesn't have a lot of hair on his head, so those were just us goofing around. But
That's great.
he's one of these adults who still have their inner child alive, and he's a very accomplished needle crafter. He's doing all kind of needle crafts, and at some point I stayed at his house, and I got the jet lag, so I was getting up very early in the morning, and so at 5 or 5:30 in the morning, I came to the living room and he was already sitting in his onesie. He was sitting there knitting like a maniac, and he just wanted coffee. And I said, yes. And he made me coffee. And then we were both sitting there at 5, 6 a.m. knitting in San Francisco. That was really fun.
That's
And
great.
yeah,
Great.
yeah.
And the next slide in 2013, you met Laura McCabe.
Yeah, and it's actually I was trying from the very first time I got to Bead and Button Show. I was trying to get in one of her classes, but I was not very accomplished in these book it on the point, you know. So I was always a little late, and it took a while until I finally made it into one of her classes. And she's actually one of the most attentive teachers that I ever experienced because she's really everywhere. She's jumping around in the room, and then she sees, oh no, you made something, like, let me show you like this. There's something where you got stuck, or so. That was really great, and I love her humor, and of course I love her beadwork. Yeah, it's like Laura was one of the first books that I held in my hand where I actually fell in love with bead weaving, was when I saw the way that she's bezeling rivolis. Yeah, just this neat look of a bezeled peyote bezeled rivoli. And so she was a big name already to me before I had these plans to go to Bead and Button Show. That was way earlier. And so it was like the first time that I managed to have a picture. And now we've had a picture of me, red hair, and her purple hair. But this was at Meet the Teachers, as far as I remember. It was where I finally caught her. Yeah, and then next to that, that's Sonoko Notsua. This was also at Bead and Button Show. It's kind of, we met right in the middle. And she always always had someone interpreting for her, and she invited me to come to Japan in that on that event, and this was like, oh my gosh, you know, that teaching there was also great. And I couldn't believe it when she was asking me. She's a very she's a very how to say that it's in Asia people are more not showing, so they're smiling at you but they're not showing so much of themselves, and so it was hard for me to understand that she was really interested in me going there, teaching there and everything, and that was interesting. And later on she was using a couple of the beads that I invented with, and she was using them a lot. And this was, to me, it was like, wow, yeah, that she's using my ideas, that was really
Yeah, that's an
showing
honor.
me that how serious that was to her as well. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. She took you seriously. You had
Yeah.
arrived.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And this next slide is dated 2019. You were in San Francisco. Can you tell just a
Yeah.
little bit about
Yeah.
these images?
Yeah, this was my last big trip. It was the last time I was traveling, ever since my life changed completely, and ever since I'm more or less stuck here. But this was I was teaching in San Francisco at a bead retreat, and then afterwards I was going to teach at Creative Castle, and I was. I'm also friends with Nancy Kane, and we at some point we got the idea, okay, because she was also at this event, and we got the idea, okay, you know what we do? We make a road trip, because I was always going to America. I was teaching. It was like arriving in New Jersey, teaching some classes, flying back home. Then the only thing that I saw was probably the highway between the airport and the place where I was teaching, and a hotel room or something like that. And then I thought, I really have to see a little bit of America when I go there, when I fly over the ocean and get there. And so we started. We were staying at Hype's house. He had a little Airbnb back then. So the first 2 days we were staying there. And so Nancy was the driver. And then there was a friend of mine, Monica. She's also in the picture. She was joining us there. And Faye, this was an American beader. She was also joining us. And so the four girls of us, we were driving down the coast. And we had our first sneak preview of COVID, because at this bead retreat, we caught some virus and we were all sick as dogs in between. And this was really like we were all coughing. We all had our fever day or whatever. And when I was in the redwoods, hiking in the redwoods, I was doing that with fever. But just as an advice, you just have to hug one of these 1,000-year-old trees, and your fever is forgotten. It's giving you so much energy, and this was a marvelous trip. This was a marvelous trip. This was just the beginning of the trip, and to explain the red arrow. In the back of this picture, you have to believe me, there is the Golden Gate Bridge. And I just wanted to prove that we were in San Francisco. There's the Golden Gate Bridge, which you can't see on the picture. You just have to believe me. Later on, I had better pictures of the Golden Gate Bridge because we drove across it. But back then, this was the closest I got to the Golden Gate Bridge so far.
Okay. Had you always wanted to see the Golden Gate Bridge?
Actually, it's one of these things, when you were a German kid growing up, this is one of these iconic views that you get, and it's with all the things that emotions that are related to California, this hippie culture, everything. This is all, to me, this is all kind of. The image of the Golden Gate Bridge is always popping up in my head. When I think about the West Coast, it's Golden Gate Bridge. It's the image popping up in my head. So it was very important to me.
Okay, great. And here you are with Carol Tripp of Creative Castle. And tell us just a little bit about these images.
Yeah, Carol is who. Those people who know her just know what happens when you meet Carol Tripp. You just fall in love with her on the first second, yeah. And she's one of my closest friends now, I have to say. She was the first one to invite me to the West Coast, and this was no, actually, we were on the way back from Beading by the Bay. Marcia de Costa, she had invited me to Beading by the Bay, and on the way back. we made a stop over at Creative Castle when we were driving to San Diego from San Francisco, and she introduced me to Carol Tripp, and ever since I was teaching for her every year and flying in there every year, and it's hanging out in her garden, having some s'mores, and in the morning, sitting in the garden with your jet lag, beading a little bit, and then a door opens, and then it goes like oatmeal, and you just nod, and then you get your oatmeal, and I just love this woman.
Yeah, she's fabulous. She's fabulous.
Yeah,
Totally.
absolutely. And she's also to me she's one of my moral compasses in the world.
Yeah.
You know, when you're mixed up, when you are struggling with something or whatever, she's always taking things down to earth again and bringing you back and calm down and rethink. And that's a really, she and Hyde, they are my moral compasses in the world.
Yeah, I feel the same way about Carol.
Yeah.
I kind of think she could have been a lawyer. She would have been if she had chosen to go down that path, she would have been a brilliant lawyer because she has a steel trap mind. And then she also has this strong moral compass.
Yeah.
And those two together are just really beautiful. But I have also asked her for advice from time to time. I think we all do.
Yeah.
And she always surprises me and comes up with exactly the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah. So now we're moving. I want to tell our viewers just a little bit about what we're going to do. We've seen, your experience as a teacher and traveling around the world and meeting new people, making a lot of very good lifelong friends in the beading field. And now I want to, jump backwards a little bit and talk about your childhood and your growing up years, and somewhat about your adult years too, and how you transitioned into becoming a full-time bead artist and a bead educator. After that, we're going to look at just a little bit of your early work when you were just getting started. And then and we're really trying to focus today on your beaded spheres. You love the sphere as a place as a locus for doing your beadwork and for testing out new techniques and new designs. So that'll be our third and final chapter for today. But I want to get started now with your formative years. You grew up. There is this beautiful photo of the Rhineland in Germany, which you very kindly provided. I think this is your photo, right?
Yeah, it's my picture.
Okay, just tell us a little bit about where you grew up and why it's special.
So the Rhineland is an area of Germany where the Romans came up to here, okay? And they knew exactly why they came up to the Rhineland. They just took the nice spots in Germany where they went back then. And the Rhineland actually is an area of Germany where very close to Belgium. It's like a 4-hour trip with a car, and you're in Paris. We're close to the Netherlands, Luxembourg, and so on. And it's a part of Germany where the people are very outgoing. I always say the people in the Rhineland, they are the Italians of Germany. It's not hard to get friends. You go in the evening, you go in a bar or whatever. Nobody's looking at you when you're sitting there alone. You're not sitting alone for a long time. Yeah. So it's a very, very down-to-earth society here. They're not tied up like this, and that's something that I like about the Rhineland. On the other hand, it's also from the climate. It's more moderate. We rarely have snow here. When we have 3 snowflakes, the whole traffic is breaking down because people are not used to that. So it's usually a rather moderate weather and everything. It's okay. There are some clouds on this picture, but actually the Rhine. This mountainside, this was when I was living in Bonn itself. It's like 15 kilometers from where I'm living now. I was living close to the River Rhine, and I had this view of these mountains. And this is an area which was very popular in the middle of the 19th century, so 1850, 70, something around that. This was the time of the Rhine Romans. So people were making, it was like the first time where people had the possibility to travel, to travel to places or to make excursions on the weekend and so on. So there were a lot of smaller restaurants, wineries along the Rhine. where people were just going on the weekends. So it was like a place where people went. And my mom, when she was a kid, she grew up somewhere else in Germany. And when she was a kid, she read a book where this was mentioned. And she always wanted to come here. And so she convinced my father to get a job in Bonn. And that's how we ended up here. And I left here for like a couple of years when I was working in northern Germany, but I came back because I just love it here.
Okay. And in this next photo, you're apparently, I never knew this, but one of the most special aspects of living in the
Yeah.
Rhineland is
Yeah.
Carnival every year. It normally happens in February, right?
Yeah, it's the point is there are several regions in Germany who are really into carnival, and of course each of them has the pure and original carnival.
But of course.
Here in the Rhineland, we have it here in the Rhineland. So it's there is also, but most of these regions are along the River Rhine. If you say like, there's also Bavaria, they do that different. In Switzerland, they have a different kind of carnival, but it's a local thing. It's not all over Germany, but this is a very serious business in the Rhineland. And I always say, this is the picture where I'm Charlie Chaplin. This is probably the only picture I have where I ever was in costume, because I always say I have 360 days in the year. I'm full on carnival. I'm funny, I'm outgoing, I love to laugh and everything. And I have a series of good jokes that I can tell you. You just have to give me a keyword and the next joke is coming up. But when the official carnival starts, from Thursday, it's Weiberfastnacht, so it's the women's carnival, and it's going from Thursday to Tuesday the next week. On these 5 days, I don't leave the house because I hate the official carnival. That's absolutely not my. And everybody's always, when people know me, they say, "But you're into carnival." And I say, "Actually, no," and they're always astonished about that. But this was I don't remember it was in Cologne, but I don't remember the actual occasion. This was actually a colleague of mine. This was in the time when I was working in the doctor's office as a physician, and she was one of the assistants working there, and we decided to go together as Charlie Chaplin. And
I
then
think it's wonderful.
I just remember on this evening I met Elvis Presley, and he wanted to give me a kiss, and I said, "No, I'm not gonna kiss you." Elvis was drunk.
Okay, that was a good move. Yep.
That's carnival in Cologne, you know.
And as Carol Tripp often says, no is a complete sentence.
That's that actually this one she has from me because
Yeah.
that's German. No is a complete sentence is a German sentence. That's a German saying.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, she's taught that to me too. And I've been a good
Sometimes you have to
student.
be German. Yeah.
Yeah, I've been a good student. I've tried to learn. It wasn't easy, but I think I'm getting there. All right, now we're going to turn to your childhood.
Yeah.
Here's some images of you as a little girl. Can you tell us a little bit about the first one?
Yeah, I just scanned these pictures a couple of years ago because I found a box with pictures that I didn't remember were existing, and I found this one very, very funny. The point is, what I love most about this picture is not the little girl that you see there. We were probably hiking somewhere in these mountain sides that you saw in the picture with the River Rhine. The leg that you see next to me, that's not my mom, that's my godmother. She was living in Portugal, and she was only here in Germany every third, fourth year. It was a while ago in the beginning of the 70s, so traveling wasn't that easy. And so whenever she was there, I just stuck to her. She was like, I don't know, I didn't know that she was my godmother back then, but I just loved this woman, and was always stuck to her when she was there. So that's why my hand is on her leg there. And yeah. But probably, usually I'm not that grumpy nowadays. Actually, I am, but I don't show that.
It's okay. You're allowed. Okay. You're allowed. You're allowed. Okay. And in this next photo, you captioned it. This is your caption, early bird. What's going on in this photo?
Yeah, I'm still sitting there in my nightgown, and next to my head, you can see my not made bed. But usually, I was always just playing with. I love to play with Legos back then when I was a kid. This clown, I didn't make this clown. My dad made this clown. I was building the house in front of the clown actually, but my dad said like, just put your hand on top as if you were just putting the last stone on the clown. And but this was, don't believe what you see in the internet. I'm just saying. No, but I was actually making the house in front of that. I love building little houses with Lego. And I think this addiction to Lego was the first step into beading, if you ask
Yeah,
me.
I'm sure you're
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Because with
absolutely.
Lego also, a brick has a certain shape and it fits
Mhm.
exactly in that spot or it doesn't fit. Either it fits or it doesn't fit, but there's no maybe.
Right, right,
Yeah,
right. They're very architectural. They have a lot of
yeah,
architectural potential
yeah,
too.
yeah,
And
yeah.
in this next photo, you captioned it "Smarty Pants." What's going on
Yeah.
here?
I think this is my sister on this picture. She's 2 years older. And it looks like I'm telling her something very, very serious and important. Actually, she probably didn't think like that, but I just love this picture of the two of us. And you can see we're typical. I mean, this is typical 70s, these dresses and everything. But this is a time, I think I was like 3 years, 4 years max, 3 years rather, on that picture. Quite
Okay.
young.
And I love this photo of you in an airplane.
Yeah, my father was a hobby pilot. He was flying gliders and small motor machines, and I was always, as a kid, I was always spending every weekend. Always on Saturdays, he was allowed to go to the airport, which is right around the corner here from where we're living now. So it wasn't a big drive. But Sunday, my mom insisted Sundays for the family. Saturday, you can go to the airport. It was sometimes a little bit hard when Sunday the sun was shining and Saturday the sun was not shining, and then he was regretting this thing. But okay, but I was spending time with him there when he was repairing something or repairing machines or whatever. We could hang out in the hangar. And
Pretty cool.
this was, as far as I remember, this was a machine that belonged to a friend of him, and so he just put me in that pilot seat there, and I got my cool picture.
That's a fabulous photo. It's
Yeah,
awesome. Okay, and in the next photo, you were a student in Sicily. What were you
yeah,
studying?
yeah. I was studying medicine, and I started studying right away after I left school. I was very lucky to get a spot right away. Usually, my final notes at school were not that good, so usually I was expecting a waiting time, but then there was a test that we had to make, and I was quite good in this test, which I didn't recognize in the first place. I was quite good in this test, and then there was also like an interview that you had to make, and so I got on the university right away. It was a little bit, I knew that I wanted to make some science thing like a chemistry, biology, biochemistry, or something like that. And I was checking out the options that you have with these jobs later on, and I wanted to do something where I'm in contact with people. And that's at some point I thought like, yeah, then medicine is mixing it up all, yeah. And yeah, I said, okay, I think I should study medicine. And then the whole family was like, oh yeah, finally, because my grandfather, he was a physician. He died in the Second World War. And so he was always this eternal figure in the background. My grandmother was very much in love with him. She never remarried. And okay, another physician in the family, that was a big thing. So the family was super excited. And I thought, okay, if everybody thinks it's so good, I do it. And I loved it for a certain time, but not for always and forever.
Okay. And in this next image, you're sitting in a beautiful, looks like very cozy armchair or sofa, and
Yeah.
you're working with your hands. What are you doing in this image?
Yeah, actually, it's funny. This picture was taken in the exact same spot where I am sitting now with my computer. This was in my mom's house. This is my mom's house, my late mom's house. And this is the exact same spot. And this was actually a typical situation on the weekend. We were watching some movie on the TV, and I was doing some kind of needlework. In this case, I'm doing, I hope I pronounce it right. I always forget it whether it's ochi or oki. I think it's oki because it's like the from the Italian word eye, the eye, the shape of the eye. This is this technique where you have these two little, we call them ships, little ships, Schiffchen. In German, it's called Schiffchenarbeit. It's a very good German. And you just tie little knots around a thread. So one of these spools is connected to the leading thread, and the other one is the knotting thread. And so one is in my mouth and the other one is lying on my lap. And that was a typical me. I was either knitting, doing something like this, lace crochet. I was making doilies until the family said, please, no more doilies. And like a maniac back then, or cross stitch. Also, I did a lot of cross stitch back then too. And
fantastic. Yeah. Okay, and in this next photo, your doctor, Sabine LIPPERT.
Yeah. This was like in between these 85. The picture before this was like in the last year I was at school, and this was like 8 years later. I was already a physician, and this was in northern Germany. It was taken in the picture was taken in the operation theater. I think we were preparing a patient for prior to surgery. This was my beginning of my life as a physician, after learning all this at medical school. In Germany, the studying medicine back then, maybe it changed nowadays, but it's a little bit different than in America. In America, you have early on, people have contacts to patients. They're working in hospital early on. In Germany, it's very theoretical up to a certain point. Then you're 1 year in hospital, and then you start working already as a physician. And so this was after this 1 year at the university here, I started my first job there. And yeah, very exciting times. And frightening times when you feel like you're dropped in the cold water and like, oh my gosh.
And you've got patients relying on you.
Yeah, you have patients relying on you. And the first thing was like after 1 week, I had my nighttime duty and I was alone. And I said, like, what am I going to do when the patient comes? And they said, you're going to treat him.
Okay, that was baptism by fire. Yes,
yeah, this was really frightening, I have to admit. But
wow,
it went fine.
So you were a doctor for, did you say a decade?
I was working in hospitals until 2000, the year 2000. So I was working in urology, and then the last year in hospital I was working in surgery, because to become a urologist you have to make 1 year in surgery department as well. And then I changed into a private practice afterwards, and finally became a full urologist, which I still am kind of on the paper. And I also made my PhD over those years. And then from 2000 to 2014, I was working in a private practice. And then I quit.
So you have an MD and a PhD?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
A lot of beaders are very educated, but you are among the most educated. Yeah, so.
Yeah, but I don't have, my aunt at some point, a PhD is something in my family that is really in very high esteem. But to me, it was more like something that I had to do on the way to become a physician. And I remember when my first beading book was published, the Perlenkochbuch, or the Beader's Cookbook, when that was published, my aunt, she was calling me and she said, why is your doctor title not on that book? It just says Sabine LIPPERT and not Dr. Sabine LIPPERT. And I said, because I don't have a PhD in beading.
Well, okay, but there are many people who would use it nonetheless. Okay.
Yeah, but the point is, if I would have published something about urology, my PhD would have been on the title. But I don't need this for my
for your ego. You don't need it.
I don't. I make that. It's okay. I'm proud that I made it, but I don't need to shovel it in people's faces.
Right. You are more than secure enough in all of your chosen fields that you don't have to show off your credentials, which are very impressive, and I admire that you don't feel the need to show them off. All right, now we turn to your early bead exploration. So we're talking approximately the years 2009 to 2010. Now you happened into a bead store, and that was the start of the rest of your life, basically. Just
Yeah,
tell us a little bit
yeah,
about what happened there.
yeah. It was. I Of course, I was always someone when I heard about let me say crafting technique, whatever. I was usually mostly needlework or lace making or so bobbin lace, whatever. I always just got the supplies that I needed for that. I tried it out, took a book or whatever, and tried to figure out how things are done. With older books, you know, they're not explaining a lot. This was pre-YouTube videos, all. So I was more or less self-teaching and try and error until something worked. And of course, at some point, I stumbled over a book where they were showing peyote technique and tubes made in peyote technique. And I just bought some beads here in a store like Home Depot, something like that. Yeah. And so it were really bad quality beads, very bad quality beads. And with these wonky little things, you couldn't do peyote stitch. It was just not looking nice at all. So I just dropped it right away. And then when you're looking out for things like this, buying old fashion jewelry, taking it apart, using those parts to create something new, I did all this stuff, but you end up with stringing mostly because there is nothing you can do with these beads because you don't have the uniform beads. And then at some point, suddenly someone told me that there is a bead shop in Bad Godesberg in the part of Bonn where I was living back then. This was the wife of my boss back then in the private practice. And she said, oh, we were just in the city together. And she said, oh, well, let's have a look for this bead shop. And I said, yeah, let's have a look, you know. And I was just getting 1 foot over the doorstep, seriously, literally 1 foot in the shop. I stood still. She bounced into me because she was coming behind me. And she said, what's wrong? And I said, let's go. And she said, but you didn't take a look. And I said, this is not going to be less than 4 hours that I will be spending in here. And I don't do that to you. Let's go. This is going to take me long. First, I have to get rid of you. And that's really how it started. And to make a long story short, she had Toho beads there. These were the first Japanese beads that I saw. And then she also had crochet rope crochet rope with bead crochet. And there was a pattern in there. And then I said to her, how are you doing that? Yeah, that's crochet. And I said, I can't do crochet. That's no problem. And how do you get the pattern in there? And she said, we're teaching classes for that. And I said, honey, I don't need a class. So I said, okay. And I said, yeah, I'm not so good in taking classes and I have to work a lot and so on. And then she gave me a website. Back then, which was Perlenhäkeln.de, so it's beadcrochet.de, which is like it was a German website, and there was a beading community or a bead crochet community, and they had also there was information exchange, so they told you how to make that and so on. And so I gathered more information there, how to also how to make these patterns in there. And then I started to bead crochet like a maniac. And I think I made like almost 100 necklaces in the very shortest time. And the funny thing was that in the beginning, I was those who know bead crochet, there are two different techniques. And there's one technique where the beads are lying like stacks. And this is, for me, this was the more difficult technique than the one where the beads are lying like this, so with a bigger circumference, because this is the normal way of doing crochet when they are lying like this. But they are the bigger ropes. They are the bigger ropes. And this is a different kind of crochet because they are the bigger ropes. And so I started working with this. And my first crochet necklace was looking like a mamba that swallowed like a rabbit, a cat, a dog, and whatsoever, because I always lost track of the number of units in the row. And so I started to just make the best out of that and was freestyling like crazy. And so on the right, you see a rope, which was one of my neater ropes back then when I already knew what I was doing, and also these bigger pearls there. They are also crochet. This is also bead crochet, but done around a wooden bead, which is in the center there. And on the left, you see also it's one of my later pieces. It's made with size 15 beads, the Jewel of the Nile. This was for a contest in this beading community. And it's showing the white Nile and the blue Nile and how they are joining, and there's the Cheops pyramid, and these two rivulets. They are the two different lakes where the different Niles are coming from. Anyway, but that's the long explanation. But you see that I was splitting the ropes there already and making loops at the end. You can do a lot with crochet when you just leave this pure same number of stitches in the row. But this was I was doing this splitting and loop making and everything. I was doing that before I was even able to make a neat rope, because when you mess it up because you increase something, then okay, I increased it, then I'm gonna split it and I make two ropes out of that one rope. Just make your mistake the plan, yeah, and then you just go from there. So my first pieces were actually no neat crochet ropes, but more freestylers, where I was going from.
Yeah. Oh, very improvisational.
Yeah.
Experimental.
Yeah.
And the next one, Sliders on the Worm.
Yeah, Sliders on the Worm was actually a piece where I already started to, or you can see that in the whole bead crochet. At some point, I started to include more and more seed beaded parts, bead weaving parts into my crochet. And Sliders on the Worm was back then. One of the vendors here, the bead vendors here in online shop, they had these Mayuki mixes. So Mayuki was making these mixes with different colors. So they all had different names. Somewhere was blue, purple beads, and so on. So I had all these bags with the bead mixes in there. And I was thinking about what to do with them. And then I thought I'm just going to make a gradient with these mixes and then alternating with these bronze colored beads. So you have these mixes going around there. People were often asking me to make a pattern for that. But I never made any patterns for my bead crochet for some reasons, but I never made that. And later on, another designer, she caught that up and she was doing great designs with this idea of the mixes, and then with stripe patterns and more elaborate patterns like that, this simple version that I made there. But this was this time with the bead mixes, and I just love this necklace very much. You can wear it short and long. It's these sliders, you can just move these sliders along. So there are different ways to wear this necklace.
Well, it's beautiful. Now, what about the salt and pepper necklace?
Yeah, salt and pepper. This is as I said, this is one of the freestylers again. So the rope part, it's all bead crochet. But here I really went into this freestyling part because there was a lot of a positive feedback on the freestylers. To me, in the beginning, it was really an accident. And don't forget, to me, it was this like, okay, I'm not even able to make a straight rope. But people were so excited about that because making a straight rope, yeah, probably they said, okay, that's easy. Which wasn't for me. So that's easy. And so they were excited about that. And then I went on with this. And this was one of the more extreme pieces because you find everything. You find these loops, you find these beaded components as end caps of that. And there are also little, it's another anaconda again, or boa constrictor. There are also wooden beads in some parts of the rope that I was crocheting around. So but this was already the part where I was way more in love with more and more in love with the seed beading techniques, with the bead weaving techniques. And that's where the journey went after that.
Okay. And then we have these two beautiful bracelets here. Those are partly
Yeah.
crocheted, but they're partly other things too,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, this is also from this transition time, but on the other hand, also I already had some bead weaving patterns published back then, and the point was I was just doing some freestylers again, and these beaded parts, and um, then people were constantly asking for a pattern for that. And it already started at that point when I was putting something on Facebook or on my blog. People were, it was like pattern, pattern. It was like, this is a one of a kind piece. I didn't count the beads. I just did this for fun, and there won't be a pattern for that. And then when people were talking me into making a workshop for that, and I said, and this is explaining now why I never wrote instructions for these, or why I decided to not write any instructions for these crochet pieces, because depending on how your tension is when you do the crochet, the rope will be thicker or thinner. And now when it's thicker, then the ring doesn't match around it anymore. Yeah, because I was just beating that around. The bangle itself is a crochet rope. And for those who do bead crochet or whatever, there's a very good trick, because people always put plastic tubes into these hollow structures that they don't collapse when you bend them around. But these plastic ropes, to find a plastic rope in the right size is very hard, or a plastic tube in the right elasticity and the right thing. It's very hard. So there's a very simple trick. When you have a rope, a hollow rope, no matter which technique, whether it's right angle weave, herringbone, whatsoever, just put pearls in there, round drug beads or whatever. When you don't have some leftovers where you say the color is nasty, and I didn't know that I was buying pure green or something like this when I bought this. So when you have something like this, just put them in there like one after the other, because it's making a very elastic rope that you can really force around your wrist even without it collapsing, and it's not bending and nothing, because the round beads are just working against each other, and it's a perfect thing. That's what I did there, and they remain freestylers. I made a beaded version later on, but never the crochet.
Okay. No, I love the idea. I mean, you're using the individual beads as armatures, and they become kind of ball joints. In effect, they're ball joints. So they're flexible and they move. And that's why you can get it on your wrist so easily.
And
I
I'm not
love that idea.
stringing them, nothing. I just pop them in on the go.
Who else uses that? Suzanne does some. Suzanne Golden does some of that, and Joyce Scott does that. Some of her most complex. You know Joyce Scott's work, her human figures that she renders in peyote stitch, and other techniques. She will put beads in there too, and of course they're hidden afterwards. No one would ever know. And so it's the most brilliant solution, because it's flexible and it adjusts to any volume.
You have them in any diameter. Yeah, and you have them in every diameter from 3 millimeter up to 10 millimeter, whatever you need.
You do. No, it's a brilliant idea. No, I love it. Okay, so you at some point you moved away from crochet, and you also moved away from your decision not to make patterns, and you moved into doing more single needle techniques and also making patterns. So by 2009 and 2010, you were already making your early patterns. And we've got 3 of your earliest patterns on this slide. Can you tell us about them?
Yeah, these 3 patterns are actually my first, if you say, bestsellers or signature pieces. The Pokhara bracelet was like a further development of one of my very first patterns that I made. The first one was hexagonal twinkle stuff. I had like weird names, which were mainly inspired by the name of the beads, and there were hexagonal beads in there, so that's why I named it. But it was like a peyote base with rhombic openings. And this Pokhara bracelet was made with the Toho cubes back then, which are most people who do peyote, they love to work with delicas or icos and have this very, very uniform look. But what I loved about these Toho cubes, they were not so perfect in their size, in their shape. Some are a little bit broken, a little bit shorter, a little bit longer. They're not washed around like a classical seed bead. And so this is made with cubes, but it's looking more organic than when you make it this very neat version of it with delicas. On the other hand, cubes are perfect when people start with peyote. At that point, I was already teaching my first classes in this local bead shop. And I figured that people, when you have a beginner's class, when people never did any peyote before, when they do it with round beads, it's harder. When they do it with a cube, it's easier to see how they stack up and everything. So, and that's why I was working with these cubes back then. And so this was a very, very popular design, and this was one of the first designs also where I was selling kits. And yeah. It's a great thing when you have your first series of kits being sold out and you have to restock. That's a great feeling, you know.
Well, then tell me, when these kits started to sell out, is that the point at which you stopped being a doctor?
This was I was for at least a year. I was working full-time as a physician and full-time as a beader. So there was a very tiring time at some point, but I came home, I dropped everything, and I was at the desk and worked until midnight, got up the next morning, went to the office again. It didn't feel like work because I was so in the tunnel. I had to figure this out, figure that out, try this, try that. And it was just crazy. My brain, it was like something, it was like opening Pandora's box, you know, like everything wanted to get out and I had to try everything. And I was, I grew up with Prussian ancestors, you know, so safety is a big thing. And just to say like, okay, I want to be a bead artist now, and then just drop that one and start with the next, that would have never worked for me. So for a year, I was earning enough money with my beading patterns and kids and the website to really say like I can maintain my life and I can support my life and pay my health insurance and pay my retirement funds and everything and go on with this and still have my safety net around and be self-employed. And then I reduced my time in the office. I told my boss that I want to have one day off. And I did this for a year or two. And then I told him I could. It was just, you know, instead of having one day off, I could imagine to just work one day in the week. And he was like, a couple of days later, he said to me, were you serious with that? And I was like, yes. And then he said, because I have someone who could come to the office, take over your job, but we would love to have you for one day in the week still here. And this I was doing for another 15 months or so. And then it felt a little bit like, you know, you gave birth already, but you're not cutting the cord, because it's a physician's point of view, but it was really weird because I was not really, with my heart was not in the medicine anymore, long time not in the medicine anymore. And I thought like, okay, that's not, you're not staying a doctor, you're not a physician anymore. You don't have the experience that you need, and you're not staying in touch with things with one day in a week. Just drop it, you know. And then I dropped it. So it was really a slow process. It was not from this moment to the next, but it was for a while I was really working both things. Yeah.
It was a good long transition. And, you know,
it was a long
you mentioned to me that you had a lot of fear, about trepidation about telling your mother that you were quitting being a doctor. Why was that again?
Yeah, my mom, my father, he passed away very early. I was just 13 years old. It was an accident. And so my mom, she was raising two teenage daughters on her own. And she was always someone, she's also she was born in 41. So this is the war generation of kids and post-war generation. And My mom, she was with my grandmother. They came from the Russian from the east, and they got in Russian captivity for a short time, and then they just made it last second over the border. So this was all things like, okay, settle down, safe and sound, and what you have, and safety first, and security first, and all that. So to her, I thought the idea of me quitting this safe job as a physician and say like, oh, I'm going to be an artist now, I thought she's going to freak out. And I was really totally afraid to tell her anything. And then I said, at some point, I really have to tell her. And I have to say, my mom, she was very talented. She, as a teenager, she was making drawings and painting, and she loved to work with watercolors and all that stuff. And she on top of my computer here, there's a drawing that she did with ink and a feather, and it's from 58, so she was 17 at that time, and it's really beautiful, and it's here in a frame. So she did that in her early years, but being a kid of the 50s, her parents, they didn't want that. So she had to do girl stuff, go to a girls' school and learn housekeeping and all that stuff. And she was not allowed to follow her dreams. And my mom was always the only one, whenever I showed her something that I made, she said, "Oh, I don't know, you get these ideas." So she was always excited about the things I'm doing there, which she was never about my knitting or my crochet doilies, by the way, but she was excited about the beadwork. And then I told her, I just, it's working and the shop is working, and this is just getting too much for me to do both. And I decided to quit this. And then she was looking at me, and I thought like, okay, 3, 2, 1, and, and she was looking at me and she said, "I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you." She didn't link that directly to her story. She never said something, "You're living my dream" or whatever. But to me, it felt a little bit like that, because I had the chance to do that. And probably she also trusted me that I'm reasonable enough to not just have these castle in the clouds kind of thing.
You did take a few years to make the transition. You didn't just jump in
Yeah,
overnight. You thought
yeah,
about it and you worked towards it, and you made
yeah,
sure it was going
yeah,
to work and that you were
yeah,
confident it was going to work. But I think you were very wise to follow your heart and just to let go of something that no longer served
yeah,
you. Because
yeah,
usually if it no longer serves you, it also no longer serves the people it's meant to
yeah,
serve, because you're not
exactly.
fully present.
Yeah,
Your heart, as you said, your heart isn't really in it anymore.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's time to move on. And you had the courage to move on. And it's
yeah,
very hard to muster the courage to move on, but you did it.
yeah,
Congratulations. And the whole world is richer. The beading world is certainly richer. And everyone else is richer too, because you did it. You took the leap. You did it.
yeah.
Now, one more piece I just want to look at, your Frankfurt bead lace. Was that an early kit too?
Yeah, Frankfurt Bead Lace was actually a piece this was the first pattern that I wrote down, the very, very first pattern. This is still a freebie on my website. And actually, this is one of the pieces where I know this is a very hot iron that I'm touching now. Okay, I know that people hate it when they say that someone is beating something like after a picture, but to me is deconstructing something or reconstructing something or trying to deconstruct something and reconstruct it just from seeing a picture, just to try to figure out what's the construction underneath. You have a two-dimensional picture of something, and what's the construction underneath? Can I figure out how to make a construction like this with these supplies that I have, that it works like this at the end? And this is something how we learn.
So now we turn to your spheres. Now, for a very long time, you've been interested in this shape. It's a geometric structure, I guess, the sphere. And you started making them as early as 2008. So really, from the very beginning of your beading career, you've been doing spheres, and you've been doing them since then. And you've gotten so good at them that you now offer patterns. For a long time, actually, you've been offering patterns. for other beaders to make them on your website. And your website is called trytobead.com. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll put a link in the show notes. So
Yeah.
we want to talk now about some of your favorite spheres, and many of these, as I said, are offered as patterns on your website. So what about this one, the first one, Cubissimus?
Yeah, and actually, to me, it was always my sphere addiction started actually because of Laura McCabe. I told you already that this was one of the first seed beading or bead weaving books that I had a look in, and I saw her crown jewel, and I just fell in love. And then I made one, being a less experienced beader, but very adventurous and I don't know if I can say the word, but kind of cocky, as a beader. I was like, I can do that, And I made the first crown jewel. My first crown jewel was an embarrassment to the queen, so to say. It was really wonky because when you need certain skills to make neat peyote. Yeah, you need to have the right thread tension and everything. My skills were not good enough at that point. And I was probably also using the wrong thread for myself. Long story short, um, I had sphere envy, severe sphere envy, and I wanted to make spheres. And then I figured that it was easier to me to work with multi-drop peyote. So the Cubissimus is one of the first pieces that I made in this technique, and you can see it looks like there are longer lines of beads, and then that's exactly it. So you have 5-drop, 1-drop, 2-drop, 1-drop, 5-drop, whatsoever, going around in the circle. And this also gave me the option when you make a classical peyote bezel, you have to find something. If you want to make a cube, you have to find a number of beads in the round that's kind of going by 4, that's dividable by 4. And otherwise you can't make a cube. If you want to make a dodecahedron, it has to be divisible by 5. And when you make these multi-drop peyote things, you're making your life easier because you can just say, okay, I'm just making a square thing and I'm just checking how many beads fit in between there. It's way more forgiving when it comes to counts. And that's how this first, or there was a group of pieces that I made, and Cubissimus is one of them. This is still one of my oldies but goldies patterns on my website. So I never had a kit for this. This is one of the patterns where I was just, back in that time, I was only writing patterns and instructions, and I had no kits in the very beginning. And this one of the very first ones, a very sparkly piece, by the way. And it has 14mm rivolis as far as I remember. So it's not too big. It's a nice little pendant that I made there.
So how large? How large would you say it is?
Like this. It's not very big. It's really a small one. If you see the 40mm rivoli down there, it's not a big one. Yeah.
Okay. And hollow on the inside?
Hollow on the inside. That's always like my personal sports. When you make. I also made some beaded beads back then, and in the first ones, they always needed a filling. And when you need a filling, and you write instructions, and I found a bead here in Germany, 16mm diameter, and then you write instructions for that. I had a pattern for a peyote beaded bead, and then an American customer comes, I can't get hold of 16mm wooden beads, and I was like, what am I going to do now? And so at that point, I decided, okay, you need to write instructions that are internationally working. Mm-hmm. So you need to have supplies that everybody can get. And then being hollow was like a necessity because of the availability of fillings. Yeah.
It was a beautiful, beautiful piece. I love the structure. I love the colors you chose. Absolutely beautiful. And what about the dodecahedron with drops?
Yeah, the next one, the drop dodecahedron. This was. I don't think that I ever wrote instructions for that one. This was a more a netting thing that I did there, a little bit peyote netting freestyle, as you can say. So it was just creating these dodecahedrons. But as many of my other first spheres, they were all based on components that were joined in the last round or last but one round or whatever. But you were always starting each of them individually. You were bezeling something or beading something, and then in one round you added it to the other ones. And this one was still going around a wooden bead. There was a wooden bead in the center. That's why that's why it was not a pattern, because then again, where to get the wooden bead? Because this was a bigger one. It's like a 3 centimeter diameter that this piece has, and it didn't work hollow.
It's beautiful though. That's lovely. And I love this experiment with peyote. Tell me about that. It's
This
so
was
unusual.
This took me a while to remember that, but luckily I posted this back on my blog, and I still wrote a little bit about that in the blog. And back then, Eva Maria Kaiser, she had a freebie there, these little 5 pointed stars, the single components of this sphere. They are from Eva Maria Kaiser, but she was joining them in a different way. She didn't make a sphere like this. I think she was joining them foot to foot or something like this and creating something from there. I don't really remember that completely. But I thought, like, if it has 5 points, it has 5 corners, it has 5 sides, I can make it a dodecahedron. And it worked all the way around. But you see on the bottom, this little pendant part that's hanging there, this is because the 12th component just didn't fit. I couldn't make it work. So I gave up at this point. So my sphere became a bell, actually. And that's why it's looking like that. The bottom is missing. For no money in the world, I could join the last star.
That's the way it is, okay?
It's the way it is.
Because if you hadn't tried to make a dodecahedron, you never would have known that this other structure is possible.
The errors are the best thing to learn from.
Errors are the best thing to learn from. And
you never learn from success, you always learn from errors.
Yes, true. And sometimes we come up with whole new techniques because of an error, right? Which is wonderful.
Yeah, exactly.
And what about the star ball?
Yeah, the star ball actually was the first, hollow dodecahedron, self-supporting dodecahedron that I made. There was a prequel to that. I don't remember. This was also a pattern out there that was beveled, but it was covering more from the chatons. And to me, it was always like, when you pay a lot of money for the sparkling stuff, you have to see it. You can bevel every small thing, but the thing is not to cover all the top and just leave the flat thing visible of the chaton, but also the outlines. And this worked with this one, but as you can see, still it's this 1-drop, 3-drop peyote that I did here, and also here we had single components working there. And I think on the next picture, if we can go to this was at some point. I decided, I made this years later, this star ball necklace, because when you go to Bead and Button Show, you need not a show piece, you need a show off piece, at least one. And so I decided to make this orbital necklace with my star balls. And this was especially made for Bead and Button Show. You don't wear that going grocery shopping. So.
Oh, I love it. It's a masterpiece. You need a masterpiece for Bead and Button, and this
was
your masterpiece, right?
Yeah.
And what was the reaction at Bead and Button? What were people saying about it?
Actually, I don't remember about this one, but I remember the year prior to, or 2 years prior, when I was working, one of the first times at Bead and Button Show, I was in the elevator in the Hyatt, and I had some of these star balls as little pendants hanging on my handbag, like as a charm. And a woman, the elevator was already full, and then we stopped on another floor, and the woman entered the elevator, and we were just regrouping in the elevator, and then she was looking at my bag, and she said, "Oh my gosh, I love your balls." The whole elevator cracked up laughing. So at least she liked them.
Good. You can't make that kind of stuff up, Okay, and then we come to spherific, another beautiful, fabulous structure.
Yeah, spherific was actually the kind of the prequel to, no, not prequel, the sequel to Star Ball. And spherific, as you can see, this is going more again into the peyote, in the classic peyote sizing. And I have like these herringbone-ish increases when you know the peyote starfish and so on, these kind of patterns. And this is also hollow, self-supporting. And there's kind of a fun story about this piece because it's not a piece that you would wear as a piece of jewelry because it's not so resistant. If you bounce against a table, it will be history, yeah? So this is one of the pieces that you make for the vitrine and so on. And one year, I think it must have been in 2009, Laura McCabe was coming to Germany, and she was invited to this craft show in Dortmund. And to me, again, I was too late to sign up for one of her classes because I never heard that she would be coming. And when someone told me, it was already too late. And then the shop owner of the local bead shop here in Bonn, where I at that point was already teaching classes, smaller beginners classes and so, she told me that she wanted to negotiate with Laura, probably to come to her shop and teach for her one day. And then I said, like, okay, if she arranged a meeting with her, that's my chance to meet Laura. So I thought, okay, to introduce myself, because of course she had no idea who I am. I thought, introduce yourself with a piece of beadwork. So you take your latest beadwork. It must be a sphere because you're talking to the Laura McCabe. Yeah. I took this ball and I was standing there, and while my friend Petra was now negotiating with Laura, we were standing there at Bead and Buncher. I had this ball behind my back, and it got more and more sweaty because I was so nervous to find my line when I said, like, I'm Sabine, you know. And so at some point I just said, yeah, hi, I'm Sabine. And that's the kind of beadwork I'm doing. And I held it under her nose. And she was like, oh, yeah, that's nice. And it was like, bunka, bunka. And this was Laura McCabe. She probably forgot that already, that she met me there. But this was my groupie moment with Laura, a long time before we really met for the first time at Bead and Button Show then. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure she loved it, and she saw its genius right away.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's not. It's seriously, it's nothing super special. It's looking nice, and it's a cute thing, and it was a step on my learning curve. But it's yeah. Anyway, but I was happy as a camper to meet her there, and I remember how nervous I was.
Beautiful story, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
to meet your idol, Laura McCabe, and now you're like your colleagues. You're very good friends.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I
That's
mean, the problem is, Laura, we're not traveling a lot anymore. There are no shows anymore. So some people, you just don't see them anymore, which is really a pity because it's the vibes are missing.
yes, I agree. You said at one point you said the chit chat, all the little
Yeah,
extra details we get
yeah,
by meeting each other in person, you know, in real life.
yeah,
All of that is dropped away.
yeah, yeah. That's true. That's true. Yeah.
But hopefully it comes back in some format, it gets reborn in the future in some way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know how.
Or maybe
Okay,
we
then
manage to make an online craft show at some point or
yeah,
whatever.
maybe so. Yeah,
Make
there's
collaborations or something. Yeah.
many
Yeah.
possibilities now.
Yeah.
And this next piece is equally beautiful. You've called it Fairyland, and I love the purple colorations here. Tell me about this piece.
Yeah, the Fairyland piece actually is again one of the dodecahedrons where I bezeled something, but in this case I was bezeling these round beads. They were the placeholders, and the specialty about this piece is that it is one of my first pieces that I made with the super duos. And there is something interesting about these super duo beads back then. The super duos were actually not the first two-hole bead which came on the market. The first two-hole bead on the market was the twin bead from Preciosa. And the twin bead was made in the classical seed bead technique, where you have a tube. Every seed bead is made like this. You have a tube of glass, you cut it in pieces, you reheat it, you polish it, and then you have a nice little round bead. The problem is only that this kind of technique, when you use this technique, the beads are not so 100% uniform. And when you have, you all know this, when you have size 8 beads or size 6 beads, there are larger differences when you work with them than when you're working with size 15 beads or size 11 beads, yeah? So the bigger the bead or the more weird the shape, the more differences you have in the forms. And when the twin beads were on the market, it didn't work for me because I needed more uniform beads for the pieces that I was beading. And then a wholesaler, Heineck Stnat is his name. He's from All Beads. He contacted me and he said to me, "Yeah, look, I have these super glue beads." And I said, "Yeah, no, that didn't work for me." And he said, "Yeah, but they are not like the twin beads. This is a pressed bead. So a pressed bead is made in a mold. So you just press it in a mold and then you polish it. And then you have a more uniform bead." And I was like, okay, that's interesting. So I was working with these super glue beads, and my fantasy for two-hole beads is not so very good, but there were gorgeous pieces back then and still are, like beautiful ropes and bracelets and herringbone technique where you have those super glues in there. So that was really great. But this brought me to the idea, okay, it seems not to be so super difficult to create a new bead shape. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that kicked off the whole start that I got the Rizzo beads made, or that he made the Rizzo beads for me. And in the next picture, I think this is the daisies ball. This is a sphere comparable with fairyland. Again, we have a basalt round bead in the center, and there you can see these beige golden colored beads. These are the Rizzo beads. And back then I was working a lot also with drop beads from my yuki, but also the drop bead is a rokai bead or a seed bead technique. So when you're working with them, some have a very slim, narrow end, some have a wider end where the bead hole is. So it's sometimes tricky to include that into the beadwork. And then I thought, okay, pressed bead, drop beads, maybe I can get my long wish for a longer bead or a more oval bead shape for an oval drop shape there. And so I was asking him, and I remember was really a fun situation. I think we also have a picture of that one. We were sitting in Hamburg at the Bead Art Fair in the breakfast room, and I was just walking over to he was sitting there having his coffee, and I was just walking over to him and said, Hanek, I was thinking about how much it costs to make a bead shape. And he said, yeah, well, you have to make the mold, and this costs about this and that, and then you have to make a first lot of beads, and then you have to coat them, make coatings on them, so this is about this and that. And I don't remember the exact cost, but I thought, like, okay, that's doable. That's an investment you can afford. And so I said, okay, I want to have a bead shape. He said, okay, what do you have in your mind? And then I made this drawing, because back then there was the Makatama bead on the market, and I was explaining to him, I said, okay, this and that, and this is a little bit too long, and I want it a little bit longer and slimmer, and bead hole here, and so on. And so also the long Magatama was on the market. You can see a nice drawing of the long Magatama. Anyway, he kept this napkin later on. To make a long story short, he produced the Rizzo bead. Then he made that bead shape, and he was asking me, how do you want to name it, and everything. And he trademarked the name. And then there was this bead. Suddenly, like 3 months later or whatever, he sent me the first batches, and I started playing with them. And this was so gorgeous. And he just said, no, you don't have to pay for that. I will produce that. I believe in you and your ideas. I will just produce this for you. And I was really very happy. And he was happy later on, because it made him more known in the market too. And so this was a win-win situation. Then I had my long drop.
So your Rizzo beads were a total success in every way.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And other people, it was a gift to other beaders too. Everyone loves them. So how did you come up with the name Rizzo?
Yeah, Rizzo is, I thought we need something international. And so I was Googling, and when you have international names, you always have to make sure that it's not sounding weird in another language. There are sometimes words that sound great in one language and that don't sound nice in another language. And it looks like a grain of rice. So I was just checking, to be fair, what rice is in Esperanto, and in Esperanto it's riso, and that's why we named it riso bead. And then also you could use the I in the logo as the riso bead. So in that logo, that you have that shape in there.
I just love it. Now, who designed the logo?
This was the designer that Heineck was working together for his website. Also, he had a web designer, and
okay.
we say
And so these
graphic designer.
images on the right, we have the image of the mold
Yeah.
of a glass bead mold, a pressed bead mold, right?
Yeah.
Is this the Rizzo mold on the right?
This is the Rizzo mold.
And so Heineck still has this your actual napkin where you drew your concept for the Rizzo bead. He actually has it hanging on his office wall.
I don't know if it's still hanging there, but when I visited him a couple of years later, I was in his office from his wholesale department or however, and I was sitting in his office, and I was looking behind his desk. There was on the wall, there were some frames, and I was looking at that, and I was like, what is that? Oh my gosh, you have the napkin? And he said, yes, I put it in a frame. That was really cute. I didn't check it again, so I wasn't there afterwards, but I hope it's still hanging there. I don't know if it's still there.
Okay, so my guess is that it's still there. Yes, and it's actually a very valuable piece of napkin. Right, moving right along here, we come to your first master class for the spheres and beyond.
You know, my addiction to spheres, and this is now like the start of the second or the really second journey into spheres. And everything was, my suitcase was already almost packed, everything was prepared, all the kids were shipped to America, and I wanted to start teaching the class. And then it was March 20. And so this was my first class that I was teaching via Zoom then in the end. I was going to go to California to Carol Tripp. And before that, I was supposed to teach on a bead retreat with Becky Haley, and everything was canceled. My flight was canceled first, and then, So we taught this. This was the infamous class, the first the first Zoom class, which was a Skype class on the first day, which was a nightmare. And the next morning, I woke up and said, this is not working. So I got a Zoom subscription right away. And I said, look, I'm going to pay that money. I need that. And then we went into Zoom, the Zoom class. But this is just by the way, and a little sidetrack. But it was I think it was to all of us. It was a very, weird time. It was like surreal, and we all know where we were when the first lockdown.
It's like 9/11. We all know, most of us know where we were on that morning, that fateful morning when 9/11 happened. It's just pretty much the same with COVID. We know where we were, and it changed all of our lives. I think, would you say it kind of, even though it was hard doing that first Skype or Zoom class, do you think it changed your life for the better, being able to do Zoom classes?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, it's different. You don't have this personal contact and everything. But it's like everything in life, it's not everything is made for everybody. But I think especially for many beaders in America, I mean, you guys, you have to travel so far. When it's always say it's in the same country, but in the same country, it's almost like for us going to another continent. It's all these flights that people have and the expenses for hotels and everything. And people said, like, I can take 4 classes for the money that I was spending on 1 class in the past, only for the travel expenses. And to me, in the beginning, it was also that all these shops were closed, and it was those shops who invited me in the past, like Creative Castle or City Beads in Chicago from Lisa Garoon, or Blanche in New Jersey, Beads by Blanche. They invited me in times when nobody knew me, and they invited me all those years and supported me in teaching there and everything, and so I thought, like, okay, I could have organized my own Zoom classes back then and said, like, okay, I'm just getting the money for the workshop and everything, and I'm organizing that, and I'm sending out the kits. But I thought back then, okay, I can do it like that and make like 10 classes like this, when you have to organize everything yourself, or I'm teaching more classes, leave all the organization to the shops, and they can still make a little bit of money by selling the beads and selling the kits. So to also pay back a little bit for the support that they gave me over all these years, and the shops were closed way longer than we all expected in the first place. So all these brick and stone shops, they had to come up with ideas to how to go on in business a little bit, and I hope that I could give them back a little bit in that way. Yeah. And so you had these pictures of the empty Creative Castle. This was like the way Creative Castle was looking in these times. And those who know this shop, there's usually always someone running around and sticking their nose in the beads and so on. So there was really ghost town. But it was a great time, and the students were great. I really have to say thank you, especially the very first class. Oh my gosh, I had no camera, nothing. I was just holding things in the camera, and everything was woozy and out of focus. And wait a second, how can I share my screen and all? This was a learning curve in the beginning, and they were patient and they had their fun and everything. And now I know that people, when the pandemic was over, a lot of people said in the Zoom classes, I hope this is going on longer, because we really like that. It's nice to take these classes from home, and it's also nice for me to teach the classes from home. And to me, to get personal a little bit, it was a necessity, because my mom, she was like, right in December 19, she got severely ill, and I was her caretaker. I was so the pandemic and the lockdown went on for me for another 2.5 years. Yeah. Then when it was long time over for the others, and I have to shout out a thank you to all the customers who still supported me in that situation when others could start traveling again and teach live classes again. I couldn't leave the house. I had to stay here, and I had to be here for my mom, which I also wanted to do. And teaching from home was also giving me the opportunity to go on with my business. I wouldn't have done that otherwise. And yeah, this is important to me to say thank you to all the people who supported me in that time. Yeah, and I have to say this technical step that was given to us in that time, also made me change my patterns a little bit. So I'm embedding videos now in my patterns, and when you embed videos, it's giving you another chance to make things that were probably not suitable for a class, because there's too much work in between, so you can't teach all the things in the class and demo everything in the class to the people, and it's too complex for drawings and pictures alone. And suddenly you can, okay, I just make a video and embed it, and once you figure out how to do that, it's not so difficult. So I embedded the videos and the patterns, and I can make more complex things now, and still people are able to easily understand that.
We were forced to grow. We were forced to grow our technological expertise during COVID. And so we did, and I think it's very cool that you're embedding videos into your patterns. It's wonderful. All right, now what about DRAW, dimensions?
Yeah, these draw dimensions, this was the masterclass that was actually planned for Creative Castle back then. And to come back to the bezels, now draw dimensions was I started working with this double right angle weave in 2019 already. I was working with this stitch as double craw, and some people say like, okay, Sabine invented double raw. No, I did not invent this stitch. Double raw is actually a right angle weave unit. So you string 4 beads, and then you add in the gaps, you put 1 bead in addition, which makes a little star. So this is a too easy shape to think that I invented that.
Okay, well, excuse me, I had not seen it anywhere else until you started
talking. But many people, I know for sure. For example, I know that Nancy Kane, she was using that, but in chains, and Marcia de Costa in her Romantica necklace, she had that. But they were using that as single units, as embellished units in chains and pieces like that. Right. And the thing that I did was that I started to use this stitch systematically. that I started to bezel with this stitch, and I made. Fun fact is that I started with a 3D version, so with double craw, which is a cube with 6 of these sides. But this is something for the theme techniques in common. But anyway, to make a long story short, this draw dimensions was to me just the next step of bezeling something in a more forgiving way, so in an easier way to bezel those pieces, and still to make something that's worked continuously. Still, we have our bezeled rivolis and everything as placeholders in these pieces, but again, they are self-supporting. And the thing here was that the stabilizers on the outside are craw bridges that are growing out of the double right angle weave bezels. So the bezels are double right angle weave, and that's why DRAW. That's why I draw dimensions. So it's also like drawing dimensions, but it's draw dimensions named after that stitch. But the bezels are double right angle weave, and the connectors in between are cubic right angle weave. And the most adventurous part was this donut on the very right side there, which is a little bit more flat, but still it was limited in its possibilities. And I wanted to have more freedom.
Okay, I got it. So is this, are these patterns on your website?
No, my workshops don't retire. To make a very long story very short, I promised in the very beginning, someone here in Germany said to me when I was working in the local bead shop, at some point I said, why don't you come to my classes anymore? You were always coming to my classes and you're not coming anymore. And she said, oh, your instructions are so good, I don't need a class to understand that. And I was like, So I thought like, okay, if you want to fill your classes, you have to make 2 different things. And this was the first point. And then I also thought people pay a lot of money to get in a class.
Yes.
And in a class, I always want to deliver a message. I want to teach a technique. I want to show something new whatsoever. And so at some point I decided, okay, once a class, always a class. It retires as a class. It will not go in my shop. You will not find my workshop patterns on my website ever. I have 300 other patterns on my website. That's plenty to bead on, but my workshops don't show up there.
Okay, that's a very wise policy and very, very fair, very fair.
Yeah, and once I promise that, I have to stick with that because I'm German, that's the problem.
But I think it's a beautiful policy.
Yeah.
I think it's very equitable and considerate, right? And wise. All right, now let's moving on to symmetry. What
Yeah.
about this structure here?
Yeah, symmetry was actually this was actually a piece where I found my freedom coming to bead shapes. Or to beaded spheres, which you will see in the next pieces as well. Symmetry is looking very complex, but it was the first piece where I just made a grid in double raw units. So I was just making some lines, triangles, whatsoever with double raw. It's a very soft, squishy thing, so you can't see anything when you start working like that. But you just make any kind of grid that you like. You can make it long, oval, round, cube shape, whatever. These are all frames. You fill these frames with a mix of some embellishment beads and chenille. So you see, you don't need a rivoli anymore. You don't need a bezeled round bead as the size giver, the shape giver, or whatever. And then, so you have a first layer double raw, you have a vertical layer of chenille rounds, you have a top layer of double raw, and that's it. So you don't have no 3D stitches that you have to join. You have nothing like that. You just work in layers. 2-dimensional bead weaving, a 3-dimensional structure in the end, which is solid as a rock. That's the best thing about it. These pieces, you can really drop them from the desk and nothing happens to them.
And how large are they?
The symmetry is about this size.
Okay.
This is a ball. These are spheres now. Most of these pieces that I made in the beginning are really spheres because I have only one neck, I have 2 ears and 2 wrists. So there's not so much space where you can put your where you can put your jewelry. And that's why I love making spheres. You can buy a glass vase and then you put them all in there and they're sparkling and shiny and look beautiful, which is standing right over there and they can look at it. It's really very decorative. And the point is, it's really funny because some people, when they bead something, it always has to be a piece of jewelry. And I always tell my students, we have something here in the Rhineland, which is actually a word in the typical German Rhineland dialect. These pieces, we call them Stehrümchen. Nice word, which actually means, translated, it's a stand-aroundling. So this is something decorative. It has no purpose. It's beautiful and you love looking at it. And there's a lot of that stuff that we have in our houses, and that's why I love making them. And but I know that some people, they only want to have some piece of jewelry. So right now I'm downsizing them, and I'm right now working on a piece which will be a pendant size in this kind of technique.
Okay.
And yeah.
Right, let's moving on to symmetry. What about this structure here?
Yeah, symmetry was actually this was actually a piece where I found my freedom coming to bead shapes or to beaded spheres, which you will see in the next pieces as well. Symmetry is looking very complex, but it was the first piece where I just made a grid in double raw units. So I was just making some lines, triangles, whatsoever with double raw. It's a very soft, squishy thing, so you can't see anything when you start working like that. But you just make any kind of grid that you like. You can make it long, oval, round, a cube shape, whatever. These are all frames. You fill these frames with a mix of some embellishment beads and chenille. So you see, you don't need a Rivoli anymore. You don't need a bezeled round bead as the size giver, the shape giver, or whatever. And then, so you have a first layer double raw, you have a vertical layer of chenille rounds, you have a top layer of double raw, and that's it. So you don't have no 3D stitches that you have to join. You have nothing like that. You just work in layers. Two-dimensional bead weaving, a three-dimensional structure in the end, which is solid as a rock. That's the best thing about it. These pieces, you can really drop them from the desk and nothing happens to them.
And how large are they?
The symmetry is about this size.
Okay.
This is a ball. These are spheres now. Most of these pieces that I made in the beginning are really spheres because I have only one neck, I have 2 ears and 2 wrists. So there's not so much space where you can put your jewelry. And that's why I love making spheres. You can buy a glass vase and then you put them all in there and they're sparkling and shiny and look beautiful, which is standing right over there and they can look at it. It's really very decorative. And the point is, it's really funny because some people, when they bead something, it always has to be a piece of jewelry. And I always tell my students, we have something here in the Rhineland, which is actually a word in the typical German Rhineland dialect. These pieces, we call them Stehrümchen. Nice word, which actually means, translated, it's a stand-aroundling. So this is something decorative. It has no purpose. It's beautiful and you love looking at it. And there's a lot of that stuff that we have in our houses, and that's why I love making them. And but I know that some people, they only want to have some piece of jewelry. So right now I'm downsizing them, and I'm right now working on a piece which will be a pendant size in this kind of technique.
Okay.
And yeah, that's
all right.
nice.
All right, that's good. That's also equitable.
Yeah.
Okay, now what was I made for?
What was I made for is a cube. It's based on the same technique like spherific, and it's a cube shape. And I was actually bending you can't see that when you make it. It's to me, it's always the genesis of a piece. I know, okay, I was facing this problem, that problem, and I was just bending the technique, and so does it still work? And it still worked. And this was what was I made for? Things are suddenly going really around the corner, and still you were working in your layers and pieces that are looking like, how on earth can you get to that bead and get that bead in there? It was no problem, because when you were in that layer, it was just there on the surface, and that's the nice thing about that. And this is a cube shape, and yeah. That's a pattern in my store. Also, the symmetry. These are patterns that are available in my shop.
Good. I'm sure people will want to go to your shop and pick out some and get started after
Yeah.
listening to you.
Yeah.
And so we're coming to the last sphere type of structure that we're going to talk about today. And it's kind of, to me, it looks like a bicone, right?
Yeah.
And this is called You Look So Fine.
Yeah. By the way, you know, all these titles of my beadwork in the last 3 years, 4 years, except of the master classes, I'm naming all of my pieces after songs. So if you could just put in the name of the piece, then you can listen to the song that I related to this piece. So that's where this is coming from.
That's wonderful.
And You Look So Fine is a very nice song from Garbage, from the band Garbage, by the way. Anyway, so this piece, there you can see that I'm leaving this round structure. So symmetry was still a dodic I had drawn. What was I made for is a cube, and this is now none of them. It's no Platonic solid. It's no Archimedean solid. It's nothing. It's like a freestyler way you work, and it's still based on this technique. And it's when you design pieces like this, and this is also something that I invite my students to really try out and do a little try and error. And this is a class, because here we have some spots where I was leaving just the classical way and said, like, okay, you just have to have the right order of steps, and then you can really go freestyle. And make longer shapes and make asymmetric shapes or whatever. When you just follow these rules and make first this, then that, and then you're fine. And then you embellish it on the top. And on this piece, on the top and on the bottom, where it's standing on, there is a bezeled rivoli, but the bezeled rivoli is not the base or a placeholder in that piece. It's just added on top. It's part of the embellishment, the playful embellishment that you add on top.
All right, so what you're teaching students is you're not just teaching how to make a particular structure, you're teaching the principles of how to move from one part of the structure or one step to another, right? So in effect, I think you're setting them free to do it their own design if they want to, right?
Yeah, actually, to me, this is the highlight of teaching. Many people just want to, that's absolutely okay. They just want to make the piece. They want to follow instructions. They don't want to think. They don't want to create because they say, I have to do this and that. I have to do all that stuff in my work. And I don't want that. I want to relax. I just want to follow a nice journey that someone is giving to me. It's like when you take a tour guide, when you go in another country. Yeah, I would be a tour guide person. Yeah, because I'm not so adventurous to figure that out all on my own. But and then there are some people, there's always 1 or 2 or 3 students in a class where you see like, okay, they are eager to design their own things. And then to me, that's also that's something where you really have the feeling you teach something. Yeah, that you infect someone with that. And I say, like, I'm not, when someone is using this technique, this kind of technique, I don't feel that the people are copying me and this technique belongs to me. Yeah, I don't own a stitch. You don't own a technique. That's just, and if someone just tomorrow puts out a picture after taking my You Look So Fine class, and she's putting out a picture and she made a donut shape of that using that, I'm a proud mama because I taught her. Or him, you know, it's like that's the best thing if you can really sprinkle your seeds and people go from there. That's the biggest success at all for me.
Yeah, it reminds me of the old parable: teach a man to fish, or give a man a fish, and you feed him for one day.
Yeah.
Teach a man to fish and you feed him for his entire life. And you're kind of you're pursuing the teach a man to fish route, or teach a beater to fish, or your principles. Principles set you free. Principles liberate you to go forth and apply them in different contexts. So it's really a gift. It's a double gift. And just to learn the structure itself from you that you've designed, which is amazing, and then to learn the principles that let you move forward. I think it's beautiful what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. So we're coming to the end of our talk today, and I want to mention that we're going to be meeting again for a second interview. And can you tell me a little bit, what have we talked about in terms of a second interview? How do you see it playing out?
Yeah, I said that in the very beginning with the beadwork evolution. To me, beading is always like something is evolving. You know, you get from one piece to the next, and in all these years, I was working my way through all kinds of techniques, and then I left the technique and said that's not working for me. And later on, I rediscovered this technique because I realized, okay, that's a very good partner with this technique, for example. Yeah, like the combination of I'm not doing classical peyote pieces now anymore, but I love to combine peyote with right angle weave. Yeah, when this kind of things, or the combination of double raw and cubic right angle weave, or chenille stitch and double raw, and so on. There are so many techniques, and my aim is never to make a piece in right angle weave or cubic right angle weave or whatever. I'm making a shape, and I'm using the technique that's helping me in that position.
Okay.
And if that technique is not working, I'm using another technique that's probably working in there. So when people ask me what kind of technique are you using in that piece, I usually say everything.
Yeah. Okay.
It's
So
instructions.
you're a synthesizer. You're synthesizing multiple techniques, which you can do when you get to a certain when you get to your point of mastery, and you know so many individual techniques, you can start figuring out how to make them go together. So in our next interview, we're going to talk about how you synthesize techniques, and you're going to show different examples of your technical syntheses. You know, you're bringing multiple techniques together, and that explains how you can come up with such incredible structures that no one else is coming up with, right? And then you introduce the concept of layering. It's not just that you're combining different techniques, it's that you're layering them in different ways. I mean, I think it's an additional thing that we want to look into. And we do have this beautiful piece here. It's a box. You recently came up with it. It's called Proud. Tell me about this piece.
Yeah, this box got the name Proud. Again, it's a song, but it got the name Proud because I was proud as a peacock when I finished that. It's a bit weird. I started this piece with the lid. Usually when you make a box, you first make the box and then you make the matching lid. I started this with the lid. And because I had this idea about the lid and this was working fine and everything, and then I was making the box, and then when the top frame of the box, when that was finished and I put the lid on top and it matched like a glove, I was like proud as a peacock, because it worked out in the first attempt. And there are a lot of different techniques in there. But mainly, again, double raw, this three-dimensional beadwork with double raw. It's kind of related to the spheres that I'm doing, but a little bit different. Some things are a little bit different from that.
So all those things we're going to cover in our next interview. Meanwhile, I want to thank you for this interview. It's been wonderful. I've really enjoyed it, and I know everyone else will enjoy it too. And I hope you keep on creating for a great many years to come, because we need you as a leading star in the field, as a guiding star.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll say goodbye now. We'll get right to work on our second interview, right?
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you too.